All right, I'm bringing you guys 5 running backs that you need in fantasy football this year in 2023. If you're playing redraft, best ball, I don't care. You need to draft these running backs. Do me a massive favor. Go ahead and smash that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like fantasy football, and comment down below right now before I even say the 5 running backs. Who's in your head? Who are you thinking I could say? Lastly, do you want our rankings, all your favorite content creators rankings, articles, and more? Go ahead and use our code LAND, L-A-N-D, at flockfantasy.com/land. That code will get you 30% off. And if you choose that Mother Flocker tier, you're gonna unlock some personalized advice from myself and Badaki on the channel. Okay, let's start with the first running back I think you need to draft in 2023. And this running back is getting way too much disrespect right now. And I'll tell you why. Let's talk about James Conner. Yeah, we're talking about James Conner on a video. That's right, that's what we're doing. Underdog currently has him as a RB27 in ADP. I have him ranked as my RB21 right now here in May. But James Conner is still the clear #1 heading into the 2023 season. I was someone who was in the camp this year that thought the Cardinals are probably going to draft a running back. I really liked this running back class. They decided to not do that. When the dust settled, none of their picks went towards running backs. So now it's the only running back worth mentioning outside of James Conner on this roster is Keaontay Ingram. And Keaontay Ingram was a 6th-round pick in 2022. He's clearly the backup. And the good news is both of these guys are really cheap. So if you're in a redraft league, I mean, you could draft James Conner and then get Keaontay Ingram probably with like your last pick. But outside of those two guys, it's Corey Clement, Tyson Williams, just a bunch of journeymen who have never held down a job for more than a week. Barring injury, James Conner will be your RB1 for this team in 2023. And for fantasy, he was actually so freaking good last year, maybe even underrated. Last year, he was the RB19. That's what he finished. On that, like that on its own is very impressive. But why don't we extrapolate it? Because he finished as the RB19 and he only played 13 games. So why don't we extrapolate that those 13 game numbers to a 17 game season? What was he on track to accomplish? Well, James Conner was on track to have over 1,000 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, 60 receptions, almost 400 receiving yards, and he was on track to finish as the RB7. Maybe you're watching the video and you're saying, look, I don't really like extrapolation. It's just not as accurate. I'm more of a points per game guy. Okay, well, why don't we look at points per game? Because James Conner in 2022 had more points per game than everyone's beloved Ramondre Stevenson. He had more points per game than Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette with Tom Brady, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Kenneth Walker, Najee Harris, Jonathan Taylor. He had more points per game than all of those running backs. In fact, he was the RB10 in points per game in 2022. And maybe you're watching this and you say, well, look, the issue with James Conner is Kyler Murray's gonna be out. Well, let's talk about Kyler Murray for a second then, because I got some good news for you people out there. We don't know when he's gonna be ready. Anyone who tells you that they know when he's gonna be ready is probably just lying to you. But how did James Conner fare without Kyler Murray for fantasy last year? Well, what I did is I looked at games where Kyler Murray was the starter and games where he was out injured, and I looked at fantasy for James Conner. So in games without Kyler Murray, James Conner had 21.3 touches compared to 16.1 with Kyler Murray. Without Kyler, he had more targets. Without Kyler, he had more total yards. And without Kyler, he had more fantasy points per game. He was the RB3 in points per game without Kyler Murray. With Kyler Murray, he was the RB26. And honestly, it's really simple. When you look at this offense, it's like, who are you going to feed? If it's Colt McCoy, it's probably going to be James Conner getting the ball 17, 18, 19, 20 times a game. Volume is king in fantasy. I think James Conner is absolute smash right now based on his ADP. The second running back that I think you guys need to draft in 2023, some of you guys who are in Dynasty might not have heard of this name before, but let's talk about Rashawn Johnson. You've heard of Bijan Robinson. Have you heard of his teammate at Texas, Rashawn Johnson, who was drafted this year? Underdog currently has him ranked as the RB45 In my rankings, he's a RB42, and he just fits. Rashawn fits what the Chicago Bears do so well, and that's run the damn ball. Last year, only 2 teams ran the ball more times per game than the Chicago Bears. That was the Eagles and the Falcons. In the same breath last year, nobody threw the ball less times per game than the Chicago Bears. Now look, there's a couple factors out there that, the offensive line was pretty poor. They improved that. Not a lot of weapons. They add DJ Moore. So the offense could change slightly, but with how good Justin Fields is as a runner, this will still be a top 5 rushing attempts per game offense in 2023. And that's great news for Rashawn Johnson, because that just means there's a bigger pie for him to eat from here in 2023. And if you look at the competition in this running back room, let's have a look at it. You got Khalil Herbert, who was a 6th round pick, Deonta Foreman, who's kind of a journeyman after the Achilles tear, Travis Homer, Treston Ebner. Herbert, let's talk about Khalil. He absolutely will have an important role in this backfield. He has been uber efficient with his touches in the last 2 seasons. He totally will have a role. However, I don't believe that Herbert is the type of talent that just automatically means that Rashawn Johnson doesn't have a chance to take this role. And if you look at their ADP, Rashawn Johnson's very attractive compared to Khalil Herbert. And if you think about it, who's going to get the opportunities on the goal line? Rashawn Johnson, at over 6 foot, 220 pounds, has a very good chance to be that guy for this offense. Again, an offense that runs the ball a lot. So look, what I'm not saying that Rashawn is just going to take over this backfield. There'll be no competition. What I am saying is there is a pathway, and it's a run-heavy offense. He's talented enough to take the job. Great size for an extended workload. So anything is a possibility for Rashawn Johnson in 2023, and specifically in best ball leagues. If you're thinking about the playoffs where you want to make your money, typically that's when we see rookie running backs get an even bigger hand on the position for their team in their rookie season. Okay, the third running back that I am drafting everywhere, unquestionably, is J.K. Dobbins. And you might be concerned, the injury. Just let's talk about it for a second. Underdog has him ranked as the running back 18 according to ADP. He's my RB17 right now, my rankings. And yes, we are finally healthy. No, for real, we're finally healthy now. No more, we'll see what he looks like at camp. We'll see what the reports say. Still some, issues with the knee. Has to get some fluid out. No, we are completely healthy now, 2 years removed from the ACL injury. We have liftoff, ladies and gentlemen. We will be full go. So what could we see with 17 healthy games in 2023 for J.K. Dobbins? Well, let's look at what he did last year, and keep in mind, he'll be even more healthy this year. In 2022, Dobbins in 8 games had 520 rushing yards and 3 total touchdowns. If you extrapolate that for a 17-game season, he was on track for 1,100 rushing yards and 6 total touchdowns. And J.K. Dobbins was really efficient in limited opportunities last year. If you look at yards per attempt, according to PFF Premium Stats, J.K. Dobbins was 4th best in the NFL at 5.5 yards per attempt. He had the 8th best breakaway percentage. If you don't know what that means, breakaway percentage is essentially how many of your rushes went for over 15 yards. So 38.5% of the time, J.K. Dobbins ran for 15 or more yards. He was 28th in yards after contact per attempt. All those numbers are a minimum of 50 attempts. In fact, not only last year, but his entire career, J.K. Dobbins has been an efficiency superstar. In 23 NFL games, he has over 1,300 yards on 5.9 yards per carry. 5.9 yards per carry in the NFL is ridiculous. But how about in college? 42 college games, over 4,400 rush yards on 6.2 yards per attempt. Absolutely crazy numbers. And then why don't we look back to the last time he was fully healthy? That was his rookie season. A lot of people don't remember this, but he shined really bright as a rookie in that 2020 season. He was 1st in yards per attempt at 5.8. He had the 4th best breakaway percentage. Almost 40% of his runs went over 15 yards. He was 10th in yards after contact per attempt. He had the 8th most touchdowns, and he was the 14th rated, he had the 14th best elusive rating. Again, minimum of 50 attempts there. So he's always been an efficient runner, and now he's finally healthy. But also, there's no real threat to his touches in this backfield. Similar to James Conner, I talked about earlier, I thought for sure that the Ravens would draft a running back, specifically because of how important the run game is to Baltimore. Such a deep class, it's so important to this offense, but they decided not to do that. Dobbins is their guy. They are all in with J.K. Dobbins in 2023. You look at this depth chart, Dobbins is your starter. Gus Edwards, he will play a role. He'll be kind of that spell back. But outside of that, Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, these guys aren't going to be competing with J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins is set to get 220 plus carries this year if he plays all 17 games. At a minimum, he'll get 220 carries. And honestly, this offense as a whole is going to be a lot better in 2023. If you look at this offense in the last couple of years, they have been really out of character. Now, new offensive coordinator comes into town from Georgia. You add Odell Beckham Jr., you add Zay Flowers, a dynamic wide receiver in the draft. Rashad Bateman, another first-round wide receiver, is back and finally healthy. We should see the Baltimore Ravens find their 2019 and 2020 form where they were top 10 in points per game as an offense in the NFL. Lamar Jackson is completely loaded all the way around, and you could see and I believe we will, more scoring opportunities for a running back like J.K. Dobbins in Baltimore. It's wheels up for J.K., but it's also wheels up for Samaje Perine. You guys like that transition? What a beautiful transition. Let's talk about Samaje Perine here for a second. I love Javonte Williams. Absolutely love him. But I think Samaje is a really good buy this year heading into fantasy drafts. Underdog has him ranked as the RB35. He's my RB34. Keep in mind, guys, this was one of Sean Payton's first moves when he became the head coach / GM. Let's be honest. He's making moves when he signed somewhere. They gave him opportunities to build a team. This was one of his first moves in Denver. I certainly thought, again, like the Ravens, that this team might draft a running back in what was a very deep class. Instead, they decided to stay put, which to me says, hey, we've already filled that backup role / starter while Javonte's out in Samaje Perine. And if you look at the money that they gave him, a lot of people kind of had a little head turn to the money. They were like, oh, that's actually quite a bit of money. You know, almost the same amount as Jamal Williams, more than Alexander Mattison, right? Also keep in mind that Sean Payton is not afraid to have a running back by committee. So if Javonte is healthy, at minimum, it will be a committee once, he gets full steam. But in 2017 and 2018, Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara split duties, and that was really good for fantasy football. Sean Payton was your head coach there. But secondly, talking about Javonte, when will he actually be ready? Seriously, when will Javonte Williams be ready to go? I keep hearing mixed opinions, mixed reviews. Some are saying, yeah, he'll probably be ready week 1. Others are saying, yeah, he might be ready to go by training camp. Others are saying it might take half a year. We don't really know when he's actually going to be ready, half a season. And keep in mind, this time last year, we were hearing reports about J.K. Dobbins saying he's probably going to be ready for camp. But that didn't mean that he was in contact, right? He was off to the side trying to get his knee more healthy. So be careful what you hear about Javonte Williams here heading into the 2023 season, because he and J.K. Dobbins had a very similar injury. It wasn't just the ACL that was torn, it was also other parts of their knees. And I think actually Javonte had a hamstring tear as well, if I'm not mistaken, but it was significant damage, and it wasn't just the ACL. Dobbins had the same issue in 2022. He ended up missing 9 games. Now, I'm not suggesting that Javonte is going to have the same fate, but what I am saying is that Samaje Perine will start a game for this team. He absolutely will. And if Javonte misses time, it will be Samaje. The GM there, George Patton, actually confirmed this. This is what he said. He said Samaje can be a starter. He's good on first, second down. He's good on third down. He has great hands. He's solid in protection. So he could be a starter for us, basically. Then he talks about Latavius Murray, who ended up not signing back with the team. He went to Buffalo. And if you look at Samaje, he's done really good as a starter in Cincinnati. From weeks 11 to 13 last year in Cincinnati, Joe Mixon was injured and Samaje Perine filled in for that team. In that time span, he was the RB2 overall. You might say, okay, well, that's a 3-week time span, right? Some people were on a bye week. Well, in points per game, he was also the RB2 in points per game. Guys, he had 23.6 PPR points per game in 3 starts. Sean Payton knows how to use his running backs, so if Javonte misses time, consider Samaje Perine a must start every week until we get Javonte Williams back. Okay, the last running back that I think you guys should go out and draft for, let's say you're playing best ball, let's say you're playing redraft, whatever the case may be, I want Rashad Penny on my teams in 2023. Underdog currently has him ranked as the RB 37. I love that price. He's my RB 31 right now. And let me explain. Rashad Penny gets a pretty bad rap because of the injuries, constantly being injured, constantly, oh, well, there's another injury. He's out another game. But Rashad Penny last year was an efficiency superstar. In 2021, when you look at running backs who had a minimum of 50 attempts, he had the #1 yards per attempt. No other running back had over 6 yards per attempt like Rashad Penny. He was first in yards after contact per attempt. Only Rashad Penny and Breece Hall were over 4 yards after contact per attempt. He had the best breakaway percentage. Over 50% of his runs went over 15 yards. He had the 5th best elusive rating, and he had the 2nd best rushing yards over expected per attempt. Only James Cook had a higher mark in 2022. Rashad Penny this offseason actually oddly reminds me a little bit of Miles Sanders. Couldn't really hold the job down, couldn't really stay healthy, was talented, was efficient, but could he ever put a real season together? Now, you could argue that Rashad Penny is like the extreme version of that, but both have been very efficient. And then when Miles Sanders was able to stay healthy in Philly, he put up huge numbers. And let's talk about those injuries a little bit more. I 100% agree with anyone out there who is now saying and shouting at the screen, Penny's always injured. He's always injured. I hear you. There's a vast history of injuries for Rashad Penny, but there's also a vast history of injuries for his competition, DeAndre Swift. Look at that depth chart. It's Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, and Trey Sermon. Most people, and you might not be most people, but I would say most people believe that Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift, probably Swift, will have the most opportunities for this team in 2023. And look, Swift is a great talent. I love watching DeAndre Swift play football, but he has only started 16 of 49 games since entering the NFL, meaning he has started just 32.6 of Detroit's games since being drafted in 2020. And you guys also have to ask the question, can Swift actually handle a bulk of carries? Because he's not really that type of running back. Well, Swift has had just 2 games over 15 rushing attempts in his entire career. In fact, shout out to Mason over at Flock Fantasy, the website that we all work together on. You can use our code LAND if you want to sign up and look at his article. But he talked about this a little bit more in depth. He said DeAndre Swift has 23 games with fewer than 10 carries and 2 games with more than 15. Guys, 5% of his career games have been over 15 rushing attempts. And you might ask yourself, well, why is that important? DeAndre Swift gets, his money through the air. Well, okay, let's talk about the offense that we're now in Philadelphia, okay? Nobody in the NFL ran the ball more than the Eagles in 2022. And nobody threw the ball less to running backs in 2022 than the Eagles. Not a single running back had over 30 targets on the year last year. I think Gainwell led the team with 29. So if a team is looking for a running back to be an efficient runner, who's that more likely to be? Well, what I did for you guys is I had a look at both Swift and Penny's fantasy outputs, and I looked at where did their points come from? Did it come from the ground as a rusher or through the air as a receiver? So why don't we look at that? Swift, for example, since 2020, that's when he entered the NFL. 2020 was the only year that he had a higher percentage of points on the ground than through the air. In 2021 and 2022, over 55% of his points came through the receiving game. But then you look at Penny, he is much more your traditional running back that I envision the Eagles utilizing. Since 2018, 2019, 2021, all the way through, we have 76, 71, 90, 89% of his fantasy points come from the ground. Between Penny, between Swift, if both are healthy, both are at their absolute peak, I believe that Penny is the better rushing option. Now, will the Eagles switch up and start targeting their running backs? Hard to say, but they were so successful last offseason or last season. You still have AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. Is Swift somehow going to be the person who just gets a bunch of receptions in this offense? Look, I'm not saying Swift is going to be irrelevant. I'm saying that Penny has a chance to be the most valuable running back in this backfield. And at his price, it's worth taking a shot, in my opinion. So those are 5 running backs that I think you need to draft in fantasy football this year. If it's redraft, if it's best ball, I don't care. Let me know in the comments below what you think. If you agree, if you disagree, it's okay. We are very early. It's May, so we've got a lot of content to cover. Appreciate you guys. Subscribe if you like the channel, and we'll see you in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.